Hello and welcome to the Happy Healthy Leaders podcast. I am Dr. Jennifer Churchill, and I will be your host and guide on this journey. Here we go. I'm so excited. This has been a long time coming in terms of getting this going. So anyone who is joining me now, I really appreciate your support and listening ear. So today really is kind of the beginning of so much I'm so excited to bring to the world through this podcast, through years of my experience as an executive coach and high performance psychologist, and my background as a competitive swimmer, as well as a current advocate and, personal journey woman, if you will, in the world of integrative medicine. And so all of that I'm bringing to this one place so that we can all understand a little bit more of like what goes into really happy, healthy leadership. And I've talked in the past about why this is really important to me to do. And, through my work, I get to work on an individual and team basis to help support leaders in their development of their organization to create happy, healthy leaders for happy, healthy organizations, ideally so that we have happier, healthier people walking around the world. And subsequently, so we have happier and healthier children at home with, just a very supportive, very nurturing, understanding environment. So my journey up to this point has been, through a lot of different variables. And, in preparation for this first series on healthy communication, I was really reflecting on so many of the workshops I've done, the one-on-one coaching that I've done up to this point through the last 16 or so years of doing this type of work at the leadership level. And I was recalling, I would say, several variables that go into healthy communication. And I was remembering a workshop, a presentation that I did and a group facilitation for a team of business banking leaders at a Fortune 100 company. And they called me in to do what a lot of leaders do, to do a development exercise, to build camaraderie, to build cohesion with current and new leaders in the organization. Because even then, so this was 2013, just looking at my notes here. Actually it was 2014. I did this facilitation for this organization. And I was recalling back to some information, some statistics that I'm going to reintroduce here around connection and how we're more connected than ever via technology, but however, we are even more disconnected than ever interpersonally. And so I want to go back to that research because obviously it's even advanced since then in terms of how many connected devices we have on our planet and how that impacts our connection, but also then how it really informs how to have healthier communication. So I'm going to revisit that data in just a moment. But the thing I want to just do is first of all, is this will be the first part of a series around healthy communication for this podcast. And the reason I wanted to start with this topic, healthy communication, is because there is so much that we can do to understand how we communicate better in our own lives and how we can communicate better at work. And we're not tapping into enough of what we have available to us to improve. And I would say, I'm on this journey just alongside you. I mean, things I feel like I'm able to coach to and help my clients achieve, I struggle with in my personal life at times, often. So I would say, while I sit here as a quote unquote informed person around this topic, we can call ourselves experts, but I think that does a disservice to just our humility when we show up and listen to information like this. And so I would say that while I'm informing and sharing this information, I am on this journey with everyone else listening. So, and I share that with my clients all the time when I'm working with them, is that I'm your guide alongside of you. I'm not ahead of you, and I try not to be behind you. I want to be alongside of you on this journey. So that's what you can expect from me is I'll bring some information, but I'm also going through the development always at the same time everyone else is. So that's important for me to just, frame and kind of recommit to my audience here as we dive into the healthy communication series. So the first part of the healthy communication series that I want to introduce around is kind of two layers. One, it has to do with self, and it also then the other aspect of healthy communication has to do with the other. And the self is a little bit more, not simple, nothing simple when it comes to understanding ourselves, but I would say it's a little less distracting to talk about self-awareness versus other awareness, because there are so many other environmental variables that go into other awareness. And the reason that I make that distinction between self and other awareness is that both must exist in your own perception and understanding to have really deep insight into a situation to better inform your communication. So before I dive into self-awareness, which is the platform and the foundation of healthy communication, I want to talk about the world that we're living in first. So when I was facilitating this workshop and team development exercise with the group of business banking leaders, I presented some data around how many connected devices that we currently live with and are in our world, in our environment, when we are trying to pay attention to the people around us and the work that we're doing. And at the time in 2004, 2015, it was actually confirmed that the number of Internet of Things. So there's two different categories around connected devices that I think are important to note. One is the Internet of Things, things that are actually connected to the internet, and then the non-IoTs, the non-internet things and devices that we also have. So like, for example, TVs that we aren't connected to the internet, but we still have them in our environment. So there are connected devices that are, connected to the internet, which we can walk around with, like our Apple Watches, smartphones, computers, et cetera, and then our non-Internet of Things devices. And the reason I think that that's important is that anywhere we go, even if we try to disconnect from the internet, we have other devices that are drawing our attention away from us. So it's important to note that in 2014, when I was giving this presentation, the number of Internet of Things and non-Internet of Things was 25 billion. It was then projected that in 2020, there would be 7 times more network devices than people in the world. So 50 billion compared to the 8 billion of people that we have in the world we're exposed to these networked devices. And the reason that I think that that is important to note is that not only do we have just our demands of our work and our relationships, and our priorities around our relationships that are extremely valuable to us, we have all of these pieces of technology that are pulling us away from it several times a minute, if not more. So that only draws us to how much more important self-awareness and our awareness around when we are paying attention to our relationships and the people that are in the room with us. It really matters. How do we disconnect, if at all possible, from all connected devices? It may be the challenge in our work environment is now that we have to use connected devices to connect with people via Zoom. It's really rare that a working organization simply meets in person anymore. It's just not occurring. So we need to really pay attention, or really need to care for how our connectivity is really actually disconnecting us more than anything. So there's the relational piece that I want to talk about and our self-awareness around that. Something else that I will get to in one of the parts of this series is how all of that actually affects our health and our well-being. Because my mission in the world is to create happy and healthy leaders. They go hand in hand and they contribute to our fulfillment, our flourishing of life. And there's a lot of research that I will dive into when it comes to the impact of network devices and the challenges that we have with them on our health. But for today, I'm really going to dive in and start an introduction around self-awareness. And I guess what I'd rather say around self-awareness, and rather than just focusing on that one word, is to talk about what's more important, and it's the collective insight that really impacts how we show up in relationships, at work, and at home. And so there's 3 different layers around awareness and insight that I want to touch on and introduce and dive into a little bit deeper today. The 3 layers include 1, self-awareness, awareness of our individual person, if you will, how we feel, what we're thinking about, what's important to us, how we show up in our purpose, if you will. And all of that comes with history. We all have not only our familiar family history, we have our work history, but we also have what I would call our relational resume. And so we have experiences, and many of them we could put maybe on paper and say, I've had these jobs, I've had these relationships. But the relational resume is about what are the feelings I've developed? What are the triggers that I've developed in response to some of these experiences? What did I learn that helped me? What can I accelerate? What am I good at based on these experiences? So really asking ourselves questions around our history, what in all of those dimensions and our circumstances up to this point in our lives. The second layer of insight and awareness is other awareness, how we are paying attention to others in our interactions. And the only, what's the word I'm looking for? The only conduit to other awareness is to first have our self-awareness so that it can inform how we read and experience other people. Because in addition to what we're perceiving and what we see, the story that we're telling ourselves about who we're interacting with, they also come with what's called their own relational resume, their emotions, their experiences, their triggers, their accelerators, what makes them great at what they do, what they like, what they don't like, what their preferences are, how you're reading their body language. That will be a whole episode on body language coming up in this series. Having some inclination around our own awareness is important, but how do we discover awareness of others? How do we become more aware of the other in the dynamic? And unfortunately, it can come with, sometimes it takes repeated experiences with the individual or the group so that we can collect patterns. Patterns are extremely important in understanding someone and looking for consistencies in those patterns of their behavior, how they speak, and their tone. But there's another way to understand and grasp awareness of others, and it's through leading with questions and intake, if you will, into who they are. How are you seeking to understand them through your communication? And so that can be a series of questions, being really intentional and explicit around sharing with them that you really are desire to understand them and to see them. So really asking the right questions helps with that awareness of other. And then the third aspect of insight and awareness is the collective experience, how the people and the data are interacting together and observing what's happening, making shifts, acknowledging your audience, really paying attention to your audience, and having a collaborative dialogue around what's happening if it's uncomfortable, what's happening if it's fun, what's happening if it's going well and you're collaborating and you're moving forward on something, or if you reach a stalemate, what's happening? All of this requires the right types of dialogue and questions. The first thing that really contributes to understanding this conversation and having this conversation is backing up and saying, what is the story I'm telling myself about what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm experiencing, and then assuming best intentions to lead with the right questions to seek and understand that other individual or the group of people that are in the room potentially, if you're in a working situation. So those are really like the preliminary layers, if you will, the 3 layers of awareness that really contribute to more accurate. It's really difficult to have perfect accuracy when it comes to collective awareness. But I would encourage you to have a goal of just more accurate collective awareness through some experiences, through some dialogue around these layers of self-awareness. The other aspect of self-awareness that I think is really important to draw attention to here or introduce is that we all think we have more self-awareness than we truly do. So I want to introduce some research that I think is really compelling to, I guess, allow us to take our blinders off, if you will. We all walk around with blinders because of our story, because of our relational resume. And that's fair. That's who we are. That's being human. This is there's nothing wrong with us because of that, because that's happening, but we can improve. We can kind of widen our view, widen our perspective, if you will, so that to just even acknowledge, I may be wrong. I'm likely wrong. I want to understand you more. So I want to introduce some research that actually drives the point home that we all walk around thinking we have more self-awareness than we actually do. In a research study that analyzed 800 different studies on different variables of self-awareness, it was determined that 90% of the thousands of people that were surveyed and interviewed and analyzed, that 90% of them believed that they were very self-aware, highly self-aware. Like, yes, 90 to 100%, I'm good. I got this. Like, I know what's going on with me. I'm pretty sure I know what's going on with you. I'm good. Let's move forward. So that happens about 90% of the time in someone's mind. Unfortunately, the research came back and noted that only 10 to 15% of people actually have high self-awareness. And they deemed this group of people the unicorns. And they dug into what made them actually self-aware in the research. And so I'll share some of those findings of like how you can benefit from people who actually are truly self-aware and how that happens and how you can develop it. And I'll get into that in just a moment. But that means, so if we look at just simple subtraction here, that means about 80% of us on any given day are walking around thinking, I'm pretty self-aware, when we're not. So I put myself in that category completely. There are many moments when I look back and thought, wow, I really thought I knew what I was doing. And in reality, I wasn't completely aware. So I'm constantly on this journey with you all in terms of figuring all of this out. But I'm really invested in figuring it out so that I can share some really helpful things with all of you. And the reality is, what they looked at in this research was what's called the above average effect. So we all think that we're better communicators, leaders, friends, and also have more self-awareness than we actually do. And that's just a human trait, because it's extremely important to be it's extremely rare to be put in situations that allow us to slow down and self-reflect. I take it for granted, quite honestly, that because of what I do for a living, that people are reflecting all day long on what they're doing and how they're showing up, because that's what I do. That's what I do for a living. So I take it for granted sometimes. In moments I forget, not everyone has the opportunity or the privilege or the time to slow down and really analyze and self-reflect, what's happening, what's going on for them. So that's why I think coaching is extremely important. And any kind of self-reflection, journaling practice is always really important. Here are some key things that I want to leave you with today in terms of thinking about your self-awareness. And it's these things. Pay attention to your story. What is the story that you're telling yourself about what's happening? And what are some alternative storylines, if you will, or plots that might be going on in your story? Because of looking at assuming best intentions in other people, what might be going on for someone else in a particular situation. Let's say you're having a conflict with someone and you really disagree about where to go forward in a project. And the reality might be, you may be right, but you may be wrong. So understanding where that individual is coming from and what's important to them in the project. So really getting under the surface of what's happening and looking at the why. Really understanding the why for you and for the other individual, so that you can understand what's motivating them towards movement, what's motivating them towards that decision and that action. And oftentimes we can come together on the why, and the why may be very similar, but the output just may look different. So really slowing down and paying attention to your story and questioning it, in a healthy way. What are some alternatives that could be happening here? The other piece that really can help you with your self-awareness is soliciting meaningful feedback. And there's a couple ways that you can do that. One is by simply asking those around you, I really want to develop and grow in this area of my life, personally and professionally. What did you experience in reaction to what I said? What were your initial thoughts in terms of how I showed up? What do you think I did well? What do you think I could do differently? Now, you're counting on, in this kind of dialogue and feedback solicitation, that the individual is going to be transparent and honest with you. So what you need to do is pick your validators in a smart way, not someone who's just going to please you and always say nice things to you. Find someone who you know is going to get gritty with you and absolutely give you real feedback. It doesn't have to be mean, and I'm hoping it's not mean. We're really striving for feedback to be productive, caring, but highly honest. Carries a huge value of integrity. The other way, so that's, getting feedback from someone at work and also at home in a relationship. And I'm going to discern these two different groups and how you can do it very differently, because not all approaches apply at work as they do at home, because you want to obviously have appropriate dialogue and appropriate relationships have their place in the right environment. But a lot of the same skill set translates to each context. Another way to actually understand your own self-awareness is to collect data. So there's lots of ways that you can collect data. Obviously, you can do it qualitatively through conversations, but there are also some unbelievable, statistically relevant and valid assessment tools for you to understand your personality types, for you to understand how you might be showing up in your organization. And there's different levels of assessment types that I think are really important to note here. Obviously, everyone's heard of the Myers-Briggs. That's a great, very fun starting point. I think that it gives you language and to come together on. It's really not so much about the results for any assessment, actually. It's really about how you use it and how you create a conversation around an assessment, because it's just one data point. You need to have multiple sets of data, qualitative and quantitative, to really truly understand the depth of your humanness and your layers. And then you can go all the way up to what I use at high levels in my organizations with my clients, and it's the Hogan Leadership Assessment Series. And I use it almost in every organization at the top levels of leadership. You can use it at management levels as well. But what that does is it breaks down your accelerators, what makes you really strong in a role. It also breaks down your derailers, what can hold you back from performing or showing up in the right way. And so it's a baseline to work from. And then you can certainly improve your behavior from that data point. It's not necessarily a predictor of permanent success, because we absolutely can change our behavior in a variety of settings, but it's about starting the dialogue and holding the mirror, really gripping the mirror in terms of what am I and who am I? How am I showing up in the room? So there's different ways to actually get the feedback. So through conversations, honest dialogue, as well as different types of assessments. The last piece of data collection I would encourage you to develop is just to pay attention to the response of others, specifically their nonverbal response. How are you showing up in the room with your body language? And then what are you observing in others? And again, patterns here are extremely important, because someone can break their pattern, what's normal and comfortable for them, and then we can misread body language. I'm going to spend a whole episode, maybe more than one. I'm hoping to interview Vanessa Van Edwards, who is an unbelievable body language expert, on one of the upcoming shows. And what's challenging about body language when it comes to understanding ourselves and understanding others and increasing our insight into what's happening is that we now work almost 50%, if not more, virtually. And that's going to remain the same. So the next part of this series is really going to be diving into our hybrid working environment and how we can develop all of these skill sets around self and other awareness and collective awareness in that world. I mean, it's not only hard when we're in person to understand it, but then we add this layer of technology between us that isn't going away. So that is a really quick overview, if you will, of insight, which includes our self-awareness, awareness of others, and then our collective awareness. And I plan to go much deeper in this topic and much more detailed around tools and bring on some thought experts, thought leaders in this area on future episodes to talk about this more. It's an ongoing development process. It's never over. I mean, every day we wake up, we're a different person. I mean, in 5 minutes, I'm going to be and feel different about what just happened right now. So we're constantly evolving. And the idea is just to be more aware of how we're evolving so that we can show up in a healthy, very collaborative, loving way in all of our relationships. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you on the next episode.